Well look, we talked about it in previous videos, so here it finally is. A video on the biggest piece of trailer park trash to ever walk the surface of TNA wrestling. And I'm not talking about ODB. I'm of course talking about the TNA Knockouts Tag Belts. Our story starts out, as most of my stories do, in the autumn of 2009. It was an exciting time for TNA where the possibilities seemed endless, but a dark cloud was brewing on the horizon. We had Vinnie Rue and Scott D'Amore, both of them were heavily pushing the TNA Knockouts. They were involved in some of the highest television viewership segments TNA had ever had. They were a great group of knockouts at the time, many of who were capable of putting on great matches, and then you had a few who were capable of something slightly different. But regardless of who it was and how it was done, there was no doubting that the knockouts were popular, and they were held in high regard, higher than the WWE Divas at the time. The Beautiful People were some of the biggest rating draws in TNA, originally comprising of Angelina Love and Velvet Sky, but then changed into the triple threat of Madison, Lacey and Velvet as the time went on, and Velvet was a de facto leader. These three were some of the three worst wrestlers on the roster, but they were guaranteed screen time each week, and that's a big deal. There wasn't many other wrestlers in TNA who could claim that. They were pretty bad at wrestling, and by bad I mean they had Lacey Von Erich. That speaks for itself. Velvet never got much better in the ring over the years she was in TNA, and admittedly Madison Rayne did go on to have a better career, but she was very green at the time. Regardless of their wrestling ability, they never took much heat because of this, so it only seemed right to create a second knockout belt just for them. It might even get defended a lot as they are on TV each week. So when did their reign with the belt start? Well, slow down, that's like 6 months away. What? Okay, fine. No Surrender 2009. Sarita and Taylor Wilde are in the finals of a tournament to crown the new knockout champions for the first time. They're basically luchadors. Taylor is already someone who's held the main knockouts belt once before and was the third ever champion. Her partner Sarita was pretending to be Mexican. She was actually Canadian, just like Taylor Wilde. For those of you who don't know, Taylor Wilde is the chick who had to work at the Sunglasses Hut whilst working for TNA. I'm sure some of you heard about that. So they eventually beat the Beautiful People, which surprised me at the time. Madison Rayne is filling in for Angelina Love here, who just left TNA just before this show due to a contract dispute. That's great timing, isn't it? And definitely foreshadowing some issues with the belt in the future. The team of Taylor Wilde and Sarita never had a name, but they did have matching outfits and their own entrance, and they had some Pokemon sounding theme music. They mostly feuded with the Beautiful People, who at this point had added Lacey Von Erich to their ranks, but this did not help them win the tag belts. The crowd genuinely loved Taylor and Sarita, and I would consider their team a success. After 106 days, Taylor and Sarita would lose the belts to a makeshift tag team of Awesome Kong and Hamada, as TNA clashed with the WWE in the Monday Night Wars for the first time. Hamada and Kong were a team with nothing in common and no reason to be tagging together, except they were a lot bigger than the other girls. It felt like management knew they were both good wrestlers, but they just had no ideas for them, so they just made them a team. It didn't work out. They would go on to defend the belts just once, beating the Beautiful People, and then Bubba the Love Sponge happened. Kong basically battered the pointless Love Sponge backstage as the little wimp was defenceless. Bubba had been running his mouth about the survivors of the Haiti earthquake, and Kong was sticking up for them. As the Love Sponge was beaten up by a woman, he realised what a loser he was, and he went crying to his best friend Hulk Hogan. Kong and Love Sponge would go back and forth with threats. This would cause Kong to bail on the TNA UK tour. I remember how livid I was at the time. She was also filing a lawsuit against Sponge. On March the 8th, Kong and Hamada were stripped of the belts, and it was announced that they had not defended them in 30 days. Even though they did beat the Beautiful People just 21 days before. The episodes aired on tape delay, so it gets kind of confusing, but they were officially given a reign of 63 days. This would be the shortest in the title's pathetic existence. So now the belts were vacated, and the same night the Beautiful People finally won the belts, defeating Taylor Wilde and Sarita, and Tara and Angelina Love, who had returned to the company. The Beautiful People were beating wrestlers who were far better than them in the ring, but at the end of the day, those belts were made for the Beautiful People to hold. Daphne interfered in the match and helped them win it as Madison pinned Tara. The Beautiful People would go on to claim they could defend the tag titles under the Freebirds rule, apart from they didn't really do it too often because Lacey was terrible and couldn't be trusted to climb into a wrestling ring, let alone defend the tag belts. The Beautiful People would mostly feud with the returning Angelina Love, who had beef with the Beautiful People for trying to replace her, and Angelina would team up with Tara. This was yet another team who had nothing in common. 1 year prior, Angelina had been the one acting just like Velvet, and now we were supposed to believe she was a whole new woman. And then Madison would win the TNA Knockouts title at the same time, and all the belts were with the Beautiful People. This was a big shock to everyone at the time, as Madison was still considered to be quite green, but after just over a year in TNA she held all the gold. She spent most of the matches being thrown around and didn't really have a finisher at this point. I think most people were just surprised it wasn't Velvet getting the push, as she'd been the de facto leader of the group. The tag belts would remain with the Beautiful People for a long time, and the match quality really suffered because of this, which in turn devalued the belts. They just weren't very good wrestlers, they certainly weren't Taylor and Sarita. They held the belt for 141 days, which turned out to be the second longest reign in the belt's history. They would eventually lose the belts to Taylor Wilde and Hamada. So how would this makeshift tag team beat the cohesive unit of the Beautiful People who had cheated all comers out of the belts up to this point? Simple, Lacey Von Erich was in the match instead of Madison Rayne. In reality, the Beautiful People were starting to break up, and losing this belt would spell the end of the Beautiful People as a team, as Madison would go on to carry the TNA Knockouts champion with the help of a returning Tara, her new buddy. Hamada and Taylor Wilde are now both two-time champions, but nobody really cares because Taylor just cut all her hair off and now she looks like a bag of salad from Aldi. I have to say that Hamada showed more personality in that butt slap than she did in her entire TNA career. This is around where the title starts getting some serious hatred. Hamada was reportedly on a high wage for a TNA knockout. She wasn't having to work in a sunglasses hut. This may be why the tag titles were barely defended in this reign. The Beautiful People lost the belts, but it was still Madison and Velvet on TV each week. I have to say Hamada was a curse to these belts, which is a shame because she was a great wrestler. There were problems around Hamada's TNA contract, and once again the tag titles had to be vacated as Hamada would leave TNA while still being the Knockouts Tag Champion. After 126 days and the belt only being defended a couple of times on TV, Hamada and Taylor were stripped of the belts. The title was vacated twice in the same year due to the title not being defended. In the same year twice. Just kill it now. They wouldn't kill it though, and they decided to have another tag tournament for the tag belts as Angelina and Velvet advanced, and so did Tara and Madison. Look, here's Miss Tessmacher's in-ring debut. To give a bit of backstory, Katie Lee Birchall had recently debuted, and now she was wrestling in TNA as Winter. She'd been appearing in mirrors and only Angelina Love could see her. It was completely stupid and Velvet just thought that she was high. So anyway, the match was set, the Beautiful People versus Tara and Madison. They'd been feuding for months, so it made sense. But Velvet gets taken out before the match and she can't compete. Angelina's forced to go at the match by herself. But suddenly Winter runs down to the ring and tags herself into the match, despite not being a participant. And then she hits a dodgy move on Madison and pins her for the free to win the tag belts for her and Angelina. What on earth? That can't be fair. That's not allowed to happen. She wasn't even in the match. The crowd are dead and don't care. And you think this was rubbish. You wait until you see where this tag team is going. It's going to get a lot worse. Angelina becomes a zombie. Winter is drugging her or hypnotising her or something. Everything fun about Angelina is taken away over the next few months. She no longer talks and she just stares at everyone like a zombie. She also no longer shakes her I was really getting concerned about Angelina's weight around this time as well. What, is Winter not allowing her to eat anymore? Between January and March, the belt was defended once, and it was boring and the gimmick is stupid. Nobody understands what's going on. Angelina is now boring and she can barely move. At Victory Road 2011, they would finally drop the belts after holding them for 80 days. They would drop the belt to storyline cousins Rosita and Sarita, who were in a faction called Mexican America, despite neither wrestler actually being Mexican. I wasn't totally against this at the time, because when Sarita held the belts last time it was actually quite good, so we might get some decent matches now. Sarita and Rosita are a bit more active in defending the belts, and they were often on TV with the rest of their faction comprising of Anarquia and Hernandez. But the matches didn't get any better. They were overbooked, bad wrestling matches, and Sarita wasn't any good as a heel. She could no longer do her nice luchador moves, and Rosita was green at the time. They even won matches with weak-looking clotheslines. Sarita would start wearing a mask after suffering a facial injury. After 129 days, they would lose the belts on an episode of Impact. Not the worst reign out of all of them, but not good either. They would lose the belts to the newly formed team of TNT, which was Terra and Tessmacher. Although the team weren't actually called that on TV, everyone knows them as that. Eventually, TNA would go on to acknowledge this nickname, but for some reason they really didn't want to do it, and it was stupid because the nickname really suited the team, and they even had attires saying TNT. So why not call them it? TNT defended the belt around 3 times on TV in 3 months. Not quite as bad as the TV title, but still pretty bad. How hard is it to have a belt on TV each week? They would lose the belts after 106 days on Impact to Gail Kim and Madison Rayne, who scored her second run with the belts. Gail would just returned from her spell in WWE. I don't know why they bothered, because they defended the title once in 4 months. It's getting worse. Once. Gail Kim also won the TNA Knockouts Championship around this time, so I guess this was her priority. In March 2012, they would lose the belts after holding them for 126 days. Yes, they're finally going to be defended again, and now we've got a new champions who might defend them. Well, guess what? Nope, it's not going to happen. The new champions are complete trash. It turns out to be a comedy character, Eric Young, and his girlfriend, ODB. I can only remember one segment from their entire run with the belts, as they clashed with Rosita and Sarita. They also had their wedding interrupted by the Mexicans. For some reason, all 3 women started fighting over Eric Young. Why would they want that loser? Apart from that, I'd rather forget this entire thing even happened. Eric Young's mentally challenged gimmick sucked, ODB in 2012 sucks, and the TNA Knockouts tag titles suck. Where's a trash can when you need one? After 469 days, Brooke Hogan would suddenly decide that Eric Young couldn't be a tag champion as he wasn't a woman, and strip them of the titles. It was completely random and dumb. And this was the end of the belts. Despite most people forgetting they even existed at this point, the titles die, thank God. All in all, there are a few reasons why the belts never worked. TNA didn't have the female talent they did when they first brought in the belts. Taylor Wilde, Kong, Roxy, Alyssa Flash amongst others, they were all gone. And the wrestlers that were left weren't as good or seasoned. This led to bad matches and makeshift tag teams that nobody cared about. Scott D'Amore probably had something to do with the belts in the first place, as he was a massive proponent of the Knockouts division and he was writing their stuff. He however left TNA in 2010 shortly after Hogan's arrival. He's now back in TNA and the Knockouts division seems to be thriving again. The belt was not defended regular enough for people to take it seriously. It was also killed the second Eric Young and ODB won it, and it became a laughingstock that no one had a reason to watch. It had no reason to stick around for as long as it did. It was a good idea at the time, as there were a lot of knockouts in the company and they were drawing some of the highest rated television segments, and this gave the beautiful people an extra excuse to be on TV. Whether you liked them or hated them, these belts went with them as part of the package. I don't think this belt was as bad as the TV title or the Grand title for that matter. Let me know down below what you think. What was the worst TNA title belt of all time? I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before Christmas, so help me out with that and I'll help you out with the Monday Night Wars episode part 4. Thanks for watching, I appreciate it.